The desperate call, the last transmission. Dr. Mirazellos carefully adjusted the crystalline extraction unit in laboratory 7 of Crystal Haven mining station and watched as another perfect specimen of rare trilithium crystal formed in the containment field. The soft blue glow from the mineral cast gentle shadows across her pale green Zephyrian features as she recorded the daily harvest numbers in her datapad. Crystal Haven was the pride of the Zephyrian mining collective, and this remote station deep in the outer rim had been peacefully extracting precious minerals for over 20 years, without any serious problems. The station housed 200 Zephyrian workers who had volunteered for the long tours of duty, because the pay was excellent and the work was meaningful to their people. Zephyrians were natural miners who could sense mineral formations through their enhanced nervous systems, and their gentle nature made them perfect for the careful work needed to extract delicate crystals without damaging them. Most of the workers had families back on Zephyr Prime, and they sent regular messages home through the quantum communication array that kept them connected to their loved ones across the vast distances of space. Mira had been on Crystal Haven for 3 years, and she loved the quiet routine of her work studying the unique properties of the minerals they discovered. The station operated on a peaceful schedule, with workers rotating through 3 shifts to keep the mining operations running smoothly around the clock. The gentle hum of the extraction equipment and the soft conversations of her colleagues in their musical Zephyrian language created an atmosphere of calm productivity that reminded her of the meditation gardens back on her homeworld. When pirates come calling, the first sign of trouble came during the night shift, when the external sensors began detecting multiple ships approaching from the edge of the system. Senior Technician Jorvak was monitoring the sensor array when the readings made him frown with confusion, because the approaching vessels were not broadcasting the standard identification codes that all legitimate ships were required to use in this sector. He tried to establish communication with the unknown ships, but received only static and interference that seemed deliberately designed to block his attempts to make contact. Captain Theron was sleeping in his quarters when Jorvak activated the general alert system, and his calm voice came over the station intercom, asking all department heads to report to the command center for an emergency briefing. Myra felt her heart rate increase as she heard the announcement, because emergency drills were always scheduled in advance, and this unexpected call meant that something real was happening to threaten their peaceful station. The command center filled quickly as the senior staff arrived, and Captain Theron studied the tactical display with growing concern as he watched 6 large vessels approaching their position at high speed. The ships appeared to be modified cargo haulers with additional weapon systems welded to their hulls and strange tribal markings painted on their sides that Jorvak recognized from security briefings about radar activity in the neighboring systems. These were Korath pirates, who had been terrorizing shipping lanes and remote outposts for months, while avoiding the stretched patrol forces of the Galactic Council. Captain Theron immediately ordered all workers to report to emergency stations, and began transmitting distress signals on all frequencies while hoping that someone would receive their call for help. Crystal Haven had only basic defensive shields designed to protect against asteroid impacts and solar radiation, and they carried no weapons beyond a few security stunners used to control dangerous wildlife on the mining asteroids. The station was completely helpless against a coordinated pirate attack, and their only hope was that the distress signal would reach someone who could send military assistance. The Korath Descend warlord Grok commanded the lead raider ship as his fleet surrounded Crystal Haven, and he smiled with satisfaction as he studied the scans of the mining station. His intelligence network had provided excellent information about the facility, and he knew it contained a fortune in rare minerals, along with 200 Zephyrian workers who would bring high prices in the slave markets of the lawless systems. The Korath were savage humanoids who had built their entire culture around raiding and conquest, and they viewed peaceful species like the Zephyrians as natural prey to be hunted and captured. The pirates attached boarding tubes to multiple airlocks around the station and began cutting through the outer doors with plasma torches, while ignoring the desperate pleas for mercy coming from the Zephyrian command center. Grok had no interest in negotiation because his reputation demanded that he take everything of value and leave no witnesses who could identify his ships to the authorities. The Korath warriors who followed him were experienced in this type of raid, and they moved through the station corridors with military precision, while terrorizing the civilian workers they encountered. Dr. Myra Zelos was in Laboratory 7 when she heard the sounds of cutting tools and explosive charges echoing through the station hull, and she realized that the pirates were forcing their way aboard despite Captain Theron's attempts to negotiate. She quickly activated the laboratory's emergency lockdown procedures and sealed herself inside the reinforced chamber, while transmitting all her research data to the backup servers hidden deep in the station core. The laboratory's independent life support system would keep her alive for several days, but she knew that eventually the raiders would break through the sealed doors and find her hiding place. The Korath warriors swept through the station with brutal efficiency, and they herded the terrified Zephyrian workers into the main cargo bay while searching for valuable equipment and data storage systems. The miners offered no resistance because their peaceful culture had never prepared them for violence, and they could only hope that cooperation would spare them from the worst of the pirates' cruelty. Captain Theron tried to protect his people by agreeing to provide access codes to the station computers, but Grok struck him down with a powered blade and announced that the Korath would take whatever they wanted without asking permission. The signal reaches Earth on the human military base called Titan Station orbiting. Saturn Admiral Rebecca Torres was reviewing deployment schedules for the Third Fleet when her communication officer announced that they were receiving a distress signal from a remote mining station in the Outer Rim. The message was weak and partially corrupted by interference, but the automated translation systems identified it as coming from Zephyrian civilians under attack by unknown raiders. Most alien distress calls were forwarded to the appropriate regional authorities, but this signal contained information that made Admiral Torres pause and read the message again more carefully. The transmission mentioned 200 civilian workers, including families with young offspring, and Admiral Torres felt her expression harden as she realized that children were involved in this attack. Human military doctrine contained specific protocols for responding to threats against non-combatant populations, and the presence of young beings automatically triggered what humans called Protocol 7, which required immediate and overwhelming military response regardless of the distance or political complications involved. Admiral Torres activated her command console and began issuing deployment orders to every human vessel within 3-star systems as the full weight of the Third Fleet prepared to respond to the call for help. Within minutes, captains were receiving their orders and crews were racing to battle stations as ships began plotting hyperspace courses to the distress coordinates. The response was automatic and massive because humans had learned through centuries of bitter experience that evil succeeded when good people failed to act decisively. Captain Sarah Mitchell was conducting training exercises aboard the heavy battlecruiser Retribution when the Protocol 7 alert came through, and every drill immediately stopped as her crew focused on their new mission. Mitchell had served in the human fleet for 15 years, and she understood exactly what the alert meant, because attacks on civilian populations triggered the deepest protective instincts of her species. The retribution was one of the most powerful. Ships in human space, and her crew included veterans of a dozen conflicts, who had learned to fight with precision and overwhelming force. The fleet mobilizes across human-controlled space. The same scene played out on hundreds of ships as crews received their deployment orders and prepared for immediate departure to respond to the alien distress call. The assault carrier Divine Fury cut short a diplomatic mission with the Centauri Alliance and began launching fighter squadrons, while the stealth destroyer Shadow Strike abandoned its patrol route to join the growing fleet. Medical ships and supply vessels volunteered for the mission without being asked, because human military doctrine emphasized that rescuing civilians meant providing comprehensive care for trauma victims. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was serving aboard the hospital ship Mercy when she received orders to prepare for a mass casualty event involving alien civilians, and she immediately began organizing medical teams trained in Zephyrian physiology and psychology. The ship's medical bay could handle 500 patients, and Rodriguez had specialists in trauma treatment for 17 different species, because humans believed that saving lives meant taking care of both physical and emotional wounds. Her teams began preparing surgical suites and recovery wards, while downloading all available information about Zephyrian biology from the medical databases. The Fleet Coordination Center on Titan Station tracked the massive mobilization as 87 human warships reported ready for departure, and Admiral Torres watched with pride as her species demonstrated the same protective response that had driven their ancestors to defend their communities against predators and natural disasters. The human fleet represented more firepower than most planetary defense systems, and all of it was being deployed to save 200 strangers they had never met, because that was how humans responded when innocent people called for help. Commander Alex Chen led the 1st Special Forces Regiment aboard the troop transport. Valkyrie and his soldiers were already preparing their equipment for close quarters combat in the cramped corridors of a mining station. Chen had extensive experience in hostage rescue operations, and he knew that success would depend on speed and precision to neutralize the raiders before they could harm their prisoners. His troops included experts in non-lethal weapons and crowd control, because human military doctrine emphasized protecting civilians even during intense combat operations. The hyperspace engines of the human fleet began spinning up as ships prepared to jump to faster than light speed, and Admiral Torres opened a communication channel to address all vessels in the rescue force. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent 30 years protecting people who could not protect themselves, and she reminded her crews that they were about to demonstrate the values that defined humanity in a galaxy that often forgot the importance of protecting the innocent. The last transmission from Crystal Haven had been received 6 hours ago, and Admiral Torres knew that every minute of delay increased the danger to the hostages, but she also knew that her fleet would arrive with enough power to end the crisis quickly and decisively. The human warships began jumping to hyperspace in perfect coordination, and their destination was a remote mining station where innocent people were waiting for rescue, while their attackers had no idea that they had just triggered the full military might of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Asterisk, the Deathworld response. When Angels of Death arrived the space around Crystal Haven, mining station had been quiet for 18 hours while Warlord Grok and his Korath raiders systematically stripped the facility of everything valuable and prepared their 200 Zephyrian prisoners for transport to the slave markets. The pirates had grown confident in their success, and many of them were celebrating their victory with stolen station supplies, while their sentries maintained only casual watch for any approaching vessels. Grok himself was in the station command center downloading the mining survey data when his sensor operator suddenly began shouting warnings about massive hyperspace signatures appearing at the edge of the system. Captain Sarah Mitchell brought the battle cruiser Retribution out of hyperspace first and immediately activated full combat protocols as her tactical officer began identifying targets and calculating firing solutions. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, with 87 warships taking predetermined positions around the mining station while maintaining clear fields of fire and protecting the medical ships that would care for the rescued civilians. Mitchell had never seen anything more beautiful than the sight of her fellow captains following human military doctrine with the precision that came from years of training and shared purpose. The Korath raiders stared in shock at their sensor displays as ship after ship materialized around them, and they realized they were facing a military force that could destroy entire star systems. The 6 pirate vessels looked like toys compared to the massive human dreadnoughts and battle cruisers that now surrounded them with weapons powered and shields raised. Grok felt his blood turn cold as he counted the enemy ships and understood that his entire clan was about to be destroyed by an enemy he had never imagined could exist. Admiral Torres commanded the fleet from her flagship Unconquerable, and the massive vessel bristled with enough firepower to reduce the pirate ships to scattered atoms within seconds. Her tactical display showed perfect positioning as every human captain maintained their assigned station, while fighter squadrons deployed in defensive screens around the medical vessels. The formation was a masterpiece of military engineering that had been developed through centuries of warfare, and every ship knew exactly where to position itself to create an impenetrable barrier around the rescue operation. The message that shook the galaxy. Admiral Torres opened communication channels on all frequencies, and her voice carried across space with the authority of someone who commanded the most powerful military force in the galaxy. She addressed the Korath raiders directly and informed them that they were surrounded by the human Third Fleet, responding to an attack on civilian populations, and that they had exactly 60 seconds to release all hostages and surrender their vessels or face immediate destruction. Her tone was calm and professional, but carried an undertone of controlled fury that made even veteran warriors feel afraid. The alien crew members, serving on human ships, watched in amazement as their human colleagues transformed from friendly people into focused instruments of warfare, and they began to understand why their species was called the Deathworlders by civilizations across the galaxy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez organized her medical teams aboard the hospital ship Mercy, while Chief Petty Officer Jackson prepared boarding parties to secure the mining station, and she asked him why humans responded with such overwhelming force to help strangers they had never met. Jackson checked his weapons and combat equipment as he explained to the confused alien medic that humans responded this way because someone had asked for help, and because there were innocent people being harmed, and because if they did not respond with decisive action, other criminals might think that peaceful civilians were easy targets. Rodriguez did not fully understand the human protective instinct, but she accepted that her colleagues were different from other species, and that this difference made them both feared and respected throughout the galaxy. Warlord Grok realized that his 6 ships were completely outmatched, and that resistance would mean the death of every Korath warrior under his command, but his pride and savage nature made it impossible for him to surrender without a fight. He ordered his vessels to prepare for combat. while knowing that they faced inevitable destruction, and he activated the station's internal defense systems to prevent the humans from easily rescuing their prisoners. The Korath had built their reputation on cruelty and violence, and Grok believed that dying in battle was better than facing the shame of defeat. Precision and overwhelming force, the human fleet responded to Korath aggression with the clinical precision that had made them the most feared military force in known space, and Captain Mitchell coordinated the attack that destroyed for pirate ships within 30 seconds, while leaving the remaining vessels crippled but intact. The human weapons systems were so advanced that they could target specific components without destroying entire ships, and this precision allowed them to eliminate threats while preserving evidence and potential intelligence sources. Commander Alex Chen led the 1st Special Forces Regiment in their assault on Crystal Haven Station, and his soldiers moved through the corridors with efficiency that amazed the Zephyrian prisoners who watched human warriors clear each section of the facility. The Special Forces troops used non-lethal weapons whenever possible, and their primary mission was protecting civilians rather than killing enemies. Chen had trained for this type of operation throughout his career, and he knew that success meant bringing every hostage home safely while minimizing casualties on both sides. Dr. Mira Zelos heard the sounds of combat moving through Crystal Haven, and she cautiously opened the sealed doors of Laboratory 7 to find human soldiers securing the research section. The lead trooper introduced himself as Sergeant Williams, and he immediately began checking her for injuries, while explaining that she was safe and that medical teams were already treating other survivors. Mira had never seen humans before, but she understood that these warriors had traveled across the galaxy to rescue strangers, and she felt overwhelming gratitude for their sacrifice. The medical teams led by Dr. Rodriguez began treating the Zephyrian prisoners, and they worked with efficiency born from extensive training in alien physiology and trauma psychology. The humans had brought enough medical supplies to treat 1,000 patients, and they established field hospitals in the station cargo bays, while specialized counselors began helping the survivors process their traumatic experience. Rodriguez supervised the treatment of dozens of patients while marveling at the dedication of her colleagues who had dropped everything to help people they had never met. The aftermath of human justice, the surviving Korath raiders found themselves in human detention facilities aboard the fleet prison ship Justice, and they discovered that humans treated even their enemies with more dignity than the pirates had shown their victims. The prisoners received medical treatment for their injuries and legal representation as they faced charges for piracy and slavery under both human and galactic law. Warlord Grok sat in his cell and realized that the humans could have simply executed his entire force, but instead chose to preserve life even when dealing with their enemies. Captain Mitchell coordinated the evacuation of Crystal Haven as engineering teams assessed the damage to the mining station and determined that repairs would take several months to complete. The human fleet had brought enough supply ships to transport all 200 Zephyrian workers to safety and provide them with temporary housing while their employer arranged for new assignments. The rescue operation had become a humanitarian mission that demonstrated human values as clearly as their military capability. Admiral Torres received reports from her ship commanders, and she felt pride in her species as the mission concluded without the loss of a single civilian life, while accomplishing the complete destruction of a major pirate threat. The human response had been massive and overwhelming, but it had also been precise and controlled, with every action designed to protect innocent life while eliminating the threat. The operation would become a case study in human military doctrine and a warning to criminals throughout the galaxy. the galactic communication networks began reporting the rescue of Crystal Haven and other species, struggled to understand how humans had mobilized such massive military force to save two strangers, the Draconian Empire's intelligence. Analysts classified the human response as preparation for major warfare, while the Galactic Council's diplomatic corps went into emergency session to discuss the implications of human military capability. Most civilizations could not comprehend that entire fleet had been assembled purely for humanitarian purposes. The legend grows. Dr. Myra Zellos found herself aboard the human medical ship Mercy as she recovered from her ordeal, and she spent hours talking with Dr. Rodriguez about human culture and values. The Zephyrian scientist had studied many species throughout her career, but she had never encountered people who would travel across the galaxy to help strangers, and she began to understand why humans were both feared and respected throughout known space. Rodriguez explained that her people had learned long ago that civilization meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. The rescued Zephyrian workers were amazed by the human fleet, and they watched from observation decks as massive warships maintained perfect formations while escort vessels guided them towards safety. Many of the miners had never seen military vessels before, and they marveled at the discipline and organization that allowed humans to coordinate such complex operations. The children among the survivors asked endless questions about the human ships and their crews, and they were delighted when officers took time to explain their equipment and duties. Captain Sarah Mitchell received a message from Zephyrian High Command, expressing gratitude for the rescue operation and requesting permission to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. The message noted that the Zephyrian people had been impressed by human military capability, but even more impressed by their willingness to use that power to protect innocent life. Mitchell forwarded the message to Admiral Torres with a recommendation that humanity accepts the diplomatic overture. The Korath clan structure was permanently broken by the destruction of Grok's raider fleet and the capture of their leadership, and other pirate groups throughout the sector began avoiding areas where they might encounter human patrols. The rescue of Crystal Haven had sent a clear message that attacking civilians would trigger overwhelming human response, and criminal organizations began changing their tactics to avoid provoking the Deathworlders, who fought not for conquest but for the protection of innocent life. When Deathworlders Care, Admiral Torres compiled her after-action report as the Third Fleet returned to normal patrol duties, and she noted that the Crystal Haven rescue had demonstrated both human military capability and human values to the galactic community. The operation had required massive resources and coordination, but it had also shown that humanity measured military responses not by the size of the threat, but by the value of what they were protecting. The report would influence human military doctrine for decades and establish protocols for similar humanitarian missions. The story of Crystal Haven spread throughout the galaxy as survivors shared their experiences, and other species began to understand that humans were different from typical military powers. The Deathworlders did not seek conquest or domination, but they would deploy overwhelming force to protect innocent life, and this combination of power and restraint made them unique among the starfaring civilizations. Diplomatic requests began arriving from dozens of species who wanted human protection agreements. Dr. Alina Rodriguez published medical journals about treating trauma in multiple alien species, and her work became standard reference material for interspecies medicine. The Crystal Haven rescue had provided valuable experience in alien psychology, and the human medical teams had learned important lessons about caring for different types of patients. Rodriguez noted that healing meant more than treating physical injuries and that successful rescue operations required comprehensive care for survivors. The human fleet returned to their various assignments throughout the galaxy, but the crews carried with them the satisfaction of knowing they had saved 200 innocent lives and eliminated a major threat to civilian shipping. The operation had cost enormous resources and required months of planning, but every human involved understood that the mission had been worth the effort, because protecting innocent life was the highest calling of their species. In the years that followed, Crystal Haven became a symbol of human values, and the mining station was rebuilt as a joint human-Cephrian research facility dedicated to studying peaceful applications of military technology. The friendship between the two species grew stronger as they worked together on projects that benefited both civilizations, and the rescued miners often spoke of the day when angels of death had arrived from Earth to save them from darkness and despair.